Hello, we're here with Jeff Schank. He's about to show us how to work with a fork gauge.
Fork gauge. Yes, thank you, Diane. This is a fork gauge. Some people call it a 10% gauge. You have two small areas of the fork gauge here. This notch is 10% smaller than the front notch. So the way we use it, you put the fork in the center of both notches on the back of the fork. Make sure it doesn't slide past the fork. And then you have this distance set. You don't move the fork gauge at this point. You slide it at the heel of the fork. That's where all the wear happens. And if you slide past that second notch, like this one does, that fork is bad. That's how you tell if a fork is bad with fork gauge. And this is part 2. We saw a bad fork with the fork gauge. Let's see if we can see what a good fork looks like with our fork gauge. Same procedure. Back of the fork into the notches. Hold it tight. Make sure it doesn't go past your, well, like it just did. Make sure it doesn't go past your second notch. Now you have that distance set. Put it on this. We expect it to go through the front, the leading notch, but it won't make it past the second notch. That fork is good. So there's another way to tell if a fork is bad. Most of the wear occurs at the heel of the fork, but the fork can also get damaged by bending. This fork gauge also shows that here. 90 degrees is what we want the fork to be at, but it could go as much as 93 degrees one way or 87 degrees the other. So let's check and see what this one measures at. These nublins here go against the back of the fork, and these down here against the top surface of the fork. And gee, Diane, since you're on that side, can you tell me what that little meter is reading down there?
Well, it's at 90.
Okay, well then that fork is good. If this fork was bent, then maybe that gauge would show this away, which would be outside of the 90.
Okay.
Or maybe this way, which is outside of the 90. Okay. But if you push down against the surface of the fork and against the back of the fork, you can tell whether that fork is bent. Okay. That's another way to sell a fork. All right, so in addition to carrying the fork gauge, I also carry a tape measure that I have attached to the fork gauge. It's more than just measuring thickness variation at the heel or wondering if the fork is bent. If the fork is bad, we need to know how thick the fork is, how wide the fork is, and especially how long the fork is. If you have it all in one set, you can just slip it in your pocket. It doesn't bother you, it doesn't take up much space, and you always have it with you. You're welcome. Enjoy the day.